There were two really big grassroots tournaments in the online Pokemon VGC scene this weekend, one of them being the Victory Road Tour with a large prize pool featuring a lot of international talent from Japan, South Korea, and Italy taking a lot of the top spots. We also had a huge VGC Trainer School Regulation G tournament with a $400 prize pool with I think around 300 participants, I want to say. So again, another large tournament, and I've recreated all of the top 8 teams from both of those tournaments. For your use, I have the EV spreads in the description below, and I'm going to go over the details of these teams and the EV spreads that I put on them. If you appreciate the resource of these videos, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let me know which teams that I missed that you want to see recreations of in the future. And with all that being said, let's hop into a breakdown of these tournaments. So we're going to look at the Victory Road teams first, just because it is the generally more prestigious tournament. The prize pool is a little bigger, even though the amount of entrants is lower, just because the entrance fee is a little bit higher for the tournament. But it does have a lot more international talent. I think these teams are generally more indicative of future metagame trends. We see on this side, the right side of the bracket for the top 16, and then on the other side is the top 16. Yeah, I do have the teams for all of these here. And starting off, we actually had the Victory Road tournament won by Sam Pandelis with this Terapagos team, which I think won the Victory Road, or maybe the Spear Pillar tournament last weekend. It got first place, but it is the Terapagos substitute calm mindset that's been going around, very popular on High Ladder as well as in the tournaments overall, with the Rocky Helmet Incineroar to tank surging strikes from opposing Urshifu and really make them pay and put them in range of Grassy Glide. From the Rillaboom, we have an Urshifu with Splash Plate running a bit of bulk and general power, max speed so that after an Icy Wind from the Flutter Mane, you can outspeed and hit a Calyrex Shadow Rider at max speed. You also have Thunder Wave and Taunt on this one. I believe most variants weren't running Taunt. A lot of them had Protect over the Taunt, but Zelda prioritizing that ability to shut down something like a Mungus, opposing Follow Me, and just general non-attacking moves, of course. The Icy Wind combos really well with the Ogerpon Heartflame and the Urshifu, which are generally a bit faster, and then the Thunder Wave allows the Terapagos to outspeed things as fast as opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider, Miraidon, if they've already gone for the Terra Fairy or something like that, which isn't too common, but they might do that in front of your Terra Fairy Moonblast option, as well as allowing the Rillaboom to move first. One comment on the Rillaboom spread and really the Terapagos spread, I guess these might be speed tying. You might want to fix that in the EV spreads if you don't want your Rillaboom and Terapagos moving at the same speed stat. It's a little more predictable if you have one at like maybe 125 speed and one at 124. Max speed in Incineroar hits 123 speed, which if you haven't been playing this format for too long might not seem too relevant, but there are definitely a lot of teams that do run that max speed Incineroar, or at least they did in early Regulation G, so it's good to just have that covered. You can go for that and not get knocked off by an Incineroar, basically outspeed them, go for a substitute in front of them, or you can substitute or Calm Mind in front of their parting shot. You'll still get negated regardless, but yeah, having the option to outspeed Incineroar is I think pretty important. Definitely on the Rillaboom to be able to go for Fake Out first. It can be nice on the Terapagos as well. Substitute is really there to avoid Amoonguss' Spore, which can otherwise be kind of annoying, but this team does have a fair amount to deal with that. The Rillaboom being able to ignore it, Ogerpon being able to follow me away the Spore without falling asleep itself, and then the Flutter Mane with the Taunt. Unfortunately, no safety goggles on the Incineroar, but the Rocky Helmet is generally a bit more useful in more situations in this meta. One of the main differences between this team that won the tournament, and I believe there's a lot of Japanese players using a similar team, but the main difference was Protect on the Flutter Mane over Taunt, and then Heartflame Ogerpon was often running Grassy Glide, which combos really well with the Rillaboom. You can go for an alternative offensive mode that's really aggressive right off the bat, potentially even knocking out an opposing Urshifu Choice Scarf, or a water-type Urshifu with the Choice Scarf item. Just go for a Terrifier, get the Embody Aspect attack boost, and then knock it out with the Grassy Surge priority boosted Grassy Glide from the Ogerpon. So that's a cool option there that the Japanese players ultimately went with, but Sam, the winner of the Victory Road Tour, and then Art Carr, the person who got second place at the Trainer Cup Tour, went for just the Woodhammer set, so a little bit more consistent. You don't have to have the Rillaboom on the field to really be offering that immediate pressure with the Woodhammer. Yeah, as I mentioned before, we have Sam ultimately progressing through the bracket to win the tournament, and then Kosukaide, which is Hyubare, the 2019 Senior Division World Champion. A really strong player, has been strong in the Masters Division as well. Basically was able to get all the way to top 4, beating Joe Ugarte in top 8. I think he tweeted about some Sleep Powders and Precipice Blades misses, but overall a great finish for this team and both players. Congrats to them. Definitely a team that has been successful in the grassroots circuit 2 weeks in a row now, so definitely I would say the top Terapagos team to be watching coming into the upcoming grassroots, as well as San Antonio and the, I think there's actually the British regional that occurs before San Antonio. So Europe's going to get their first shake at Regulation G, and we'll see what happens, but I do expect that Terapagos team to be very strong there. Zooming out to the second team, this team was piloted to second place by Jeffrey Lemon. He's actually one of my locals, so congrats to him. Definitely a very deep run. Looking forward to his finish at San Antonio. But yeah, been doing really well. I think he got top 8 in the Spear Pillar USPA tournament last weekend, which was a larger tour than the Victory Road Tour. But yeah, 2 strong finishes online. Definitely a strong player and a strong team. This is basically just the same team that Michael Derbesti took to a top 4 at the World Championship, so proving that it does have great staying power. And although it ultimately lost to Zelda in the finals, I do think it has Zama Basc naturally has a pretty strong Terapagos matchup with the body press being threatened as well as the wide guard to mitigate any offensive damage from the Terra Starstorm. I think definitely a strong team heading into the metagame. I covered it last week, so I don't want to go into too many details. The Chen Pao Sword of Ruin combos really well with the body presses from the Zamazenta as well as Heavy Slam to some extent, but having the body press that can't be intimidated away along with the Sword of Ruin means that you can just consistently trade damage really well with Zamazenta, ignoring Intimidate. Urshifu with the Safety Goggles substitute set is really strong against Amoonguss and Trick Room teams, which Zamazenta can kind of struggle into, but I think this team with the substitute, Safety Goggles, and the Wide Guard on the Zama does really well into opposing Calyrex. Entei's cool, you have the Sword of Ruin, Extreme Speed, Terra Normal combo that you usually see on Dragonite. Inner Focus making you immune to Intimidate again. And then Sacred Fire with max speed allows you to outspeed and potentially burn an Urshifu before they can hit you. Stone Edge just strong into fire types like Incineroar and then Flare Blitz in the situation where you don't think Sacred Fire will take a KO, you have 20 extra base power with the Flare Blitz, as well as it can't miss, so that's cool. Now moving on to the Rillaboom, I'm running a bit of an interesting set here. It might be wrong to run this, you might just want to run a faster or bulkier one, but I'm running a lot of attack investment, so that after a Sword of Ruin is active, you have a 87% chance to knock out Urshifu with the Choice Scarf in one hit if they're 4 HP. So that feels like it could be pretty important so that you don't have to burn your Terra to go resisting the Surging Strikes from the Urshifu. Just knocking it out early could be pretty cool. But you do have a lot of other options to deal with it on this team, like the Flutter Mane, Extreme Speed from the Entei, and then just hitting it with a few body presses with the Sword of Ruin on the field yourself. So it's kind of a bit of a commitment on the EVs, but you don't have to do this. You could definitely just run the other Rillaboom spreads that I have in this video. Aside from that, we have a Flutter Mane with Shadow Ball, which is important to force out Terrastalizations from the Calyrex Shadow Riders. If they're running Terra Dark, you can hit them really hard with the Moonblast if they go for the Terra. And if not, you can just Icy Wind them. If they're like Terra Normal, Terra Fairy, you can go for Body Press if they're Terra Normal, and then everything else can handle Terra Fairy pretty well by just hitting it pretty hard after its -1 speed from the Icy Wind. Sun actually had a really good weekend with 2 Groudons featuring in the top 8, one making it all the way to the top 4, and then a top 8 Koraidon placing. I would say this is really interesting because we haven't seen this same effect in IRL tours. I think the best Groudon finish we saw was maybe a top 16 from Jonzu, very early format, maybe at Los Angeles or Indianapolis, and then Koraidon had some scattered success, but maybe only one or two top 8s across all of Regulation G. So to see it doing really well in this very competitive online tour, Sun in general is pretty cool. Looking at the top 4 team, you have a soft Trick Room mode. Everything on the team can be pretty fast, but you have the Groudon Raging Bolt that can function inside of the Trick Room. Oftentimes you're using this Farigiraf to handle opposing Calyrex Ice Rider, because that can kind of be annoying for the whole team if they're like a strong Terra type, but you have Chi-Yu to force the Terra with the Fire type moves, and then the Ogre Pawn to hit it hard, whether it goes for Terra Water or Terra Fire with the Ivy Cudgel or Power Whip. And then if they don't Terra at all, yeah, you have Foul Play with the Farigiraf and Helping Hand to support the really strong boosted attackers like Chi-Yu. In the Sun, Groudon's bulked up Precipice Blades or Heat Crashes after a Helping Hand is going to do a ton of damage, and then Raging Bolt in the Sun with Terra Electric Photosynthesis. Helping Hand is going to make it do pretty insane damage as well. I'm running 124 speed here, not because it's a specific Icy Wind speed, but just outspeed opposing max speed Incineroar. You don't want to have to deal with like having to go for Terra Fire if they're Will-O-Wisp max speed Incineroar, which isn't that uncommon. So that's the option there. You can just go for a Helping Hand Precipice Blades and knock it out. Or if you find out that they are max speed, it doesn't really matter that much. You at that point know that a max attack Precipice Blades is going to knock them out in one hit, so that is kind of important there. Flutter Mane is Taunt and Icy Wind. Taunt is kind of important to stop Amoonguss from running amok. You don't have any safety goggles on the team so outside of Farigiraf, which isn't that proactive or easy to get on the field a lot of the time. You have a lot of Pokemon that can't protect, like the Raging Bolt and the Chi-Yu, so having something like Taunt Flutter on the field to make sure that you don't kind of get sandwiched against an Amoonguss can be cool. You can also taunt a Calyrex Ice Rider if you think they're going to go for a Trick Room or another Farigiraf in a similar situation. Just generally good usage there. And then Chi-Yu is max speed. In the Sun, you can just go for really fast Beads of Ruin. Sun boosted overheats. You can also boost up your Flutter Mane and Raging Bolt's damage output to absurd levels. And then late game, if you happen to get the Farigiraf and the Chi-Yu up with the Sun active, you can start going for not Terra Fire, but just Sun boosted Heat Waves with Helping Hand are going to start knocking out pretty much anything that does not resist it. We'll back up and look at the other top 8 Groudon team. This one was Zhou UX9, definitely a very different direction, a bit speedier of a team. Same Groudon set here outside of the bulk up not being here. We have a clear amulet set to ignore Intimidate. We can outspeed and knock out most Incineroar unless they are bold with the high horsepower. And if you find out that they're not bold, you can go for a Precipice Blades and have a pretty good chance to knock out the Incineroar. Just depends on how much defense EVs they have. And if you hit, of course, high horsepower is definitely going to be a bit more consistent. I do like the choice to have high horsepower here. Obviously, a Swords Dance or a Bulk Up. If you roll high, it's definitely stronger, but having the option to have more consistent endgames where you just need to hit one target with a ground type move with the higher horsepower is definitely a smart choice from Joe, trying to minimize RNG while still having the options to high roll with things like Sleep Powder and the Jumpluff and Precipice Blades from the Groudon. As another fire type abuser, we have the Ogerpon Heartflame with the Terrafire Embody aspect, Ivy Cudgel option to really threaten things as well as just be a strong, fast attacking option. You have Woodhammer as a strong offensive option against the grass types that would otherwise be able to take the Ivy Cudgel pretty well. A lot of Terra Water Amoonguss in the meta, so if they go for that in front of your Ivy Cudgel, you can just Woodhammer them the next turn or even read it that turn and Woodhammer and knock them out in one hit. The Raging Bolt is a Terra Water here, so definitely a more defensive Raging Bolt. I'm running a bit of speed just to be able to outspeed, I want to say, Chien-Pao, like max speed Chien-Pao, Flutter Mane, etc. But really, I'm prioritizing a lot of bulk. The set here should live a Glacial Lance from max attack Calyrex, and it'll obviously take very little damage if you go for the Terra Water, but oftentimes you don't have that luxury. Aside from that, we have an Electro Web set to allow the Groudon to move really fast. After an Electro Web, you'll outspeed things such as opposing Ogerpon, which is important. You just knock them out after you go for the Electro Web. I don't think unless they're very bulky, a Hearthflame or a Cornerstone will be able to live that. So that's cool there. And then you have Volt Switch to kind of pivot around with Incineroar as well. Get Fake Out, Pressure Active, or get Jumpluff back in to go for Rage Powders, Encores, and Tailwinds in weird spots for your opponent. So moving on to the last Pokemon on the team, it is the Urshifu Dark with the Stellar Terra doing a ton of damage with both the close combat, Wicked Blow, and Sucker Punch. Glad to see Joe shifting away from his Miraidon team that he was doing in Regulation G last time, even though we won a pretty big Regulation G Japanese tournament. I didn't do so hot at the other IRL event, so deciding to go for a bit more comfort in Groudon and try and make it as consistent as he can. If anyone's going to do it, it could be him, so I do like this direction for him and for Groudon teams in general this weekend. Next up, we have Koraidon. This team by Mirai was able to get top 8. So this is the Koraidon team that I was actually most interested in coming into the World Championship. It didn't do that well at the end of the day, but I do think that the Chi-Yu and the Ditto on this team are really strong. Covert Cloak Chi-Yu with Taunt, really annoying into the Calyrex Ice matchup, or rather it's annoying for them because you can't fake out it, they can taunt your Calyrex, they can't do that much damage if you go for Terra Water in front of the Calyrex, and obviously Heat Wave and Overheat threaten huge amounts of damage and force a Terastallization out of them, which at that point, if they're Terra Fire, you can hit them with the Ivy Cudgel. If they're Terra Water, you can deal with it with a number of ways, but namely you can go for the Power Whip from the Ogerpon or the electric type moves from the Raging Bolt. And then Ditto in Trick Room is really annoying with Focus Sash. You can just go for Trick Room, reverse any headway they went to get the Trick Room up, and then just use your faster Pokemon at that point to win the game without being locked into Choice Scarf Trick Room. You can also copy attack boost from the Calyrex, or if you're playing against Calyrex Shadow Rider, you can go for a your own reverse sweep with your Focus Sash Ditto with Astral Barrage, and then Flutter Mane, you can go for Icy Wind at some point after the Ditto is in and just get the opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider to underspeed it guaranteed, and then just sweep with your boosted up Ditto Calyrex Shadow Rider. So yeah, pretty cool Koraidon victory here. And then we saw another Zamazenta team with the Amoonguss over the Urshifu Water on Jeff's team, but basically what I kind of see this as focusing on is beating opposing Trick Room teams and beating opposing Dondozo teams, because I think Michael said that one of the weaker matchups for this team is the Calyrex Shadow Rider Dondozo matchup, so we see a Clear Smog Amoonguss to try and patch that up. I'm not really entirely sure what the trade-off for the Urshifu and the Amoonguss is in terms of matchups, but it does seem like it could be effective with the rise of opposing Dondozo Calyrex Shadow Rider, which wasn't that common deep in this tournament, but was definitely very common in the other tournament, the Trainer School, which we're about to get into before this last Calyrex Shadow Rider team on the Victory Road side. Just realized that I hadn't relocated the screen to basically show the full sprite in the name, but hopefully that wasn't too distracting. Basically, this team is one of the top Calyrex Shadow Rider balance teams. Really, there's not a whole lot special about it. It's pretty optimized to win both the mirror as well as just have really good matchup spread overall. Terra Normal allows you to do really well in the mirror and not have to worry about your opponent's Astro Barrages, well, they usually will have to worry about it from you. I'm running max speed special attack to just, again, focus on that mirror. Incineroar is that max defense Rocky Helmet set that I've mentioned as being really strong against opposing Urshifu. It really primes it for the Rillaboom to clean it up late game. Aside from that, we have an offensive Raging Bolt with the booster energy, dealing tons of damage, Amoonguss as a redirector. No Pollen Puff, so no defensive support, but we have a very defensive one to tank a Glacial Lance from opposing Calyrex. You have Covert Cloak, so they can't fake out cycle you, so it can really limit the ability for the Calyrex to deal a lot of damage to you in Trick Room, the Calyrex Ice that is, especially if you pop a Terra Water, then they're just doing very little damage overall, so unless they're a Terra Grass set, you're really going to run over those sort of Calyrex teams. Urshifu is running the Stellar Terra set, which is mainly to get both the boost on the Surging Strikes, but the close combat, being able to knock out a Terapagos in one hit, is definitely very important. You just chip it down a little bit, and then the Stellar Terra close combat KOs them in one. That's the main purpose of that. It also does stronger damage into something that might Terra Water in front of you. You can just go for a Stellar Terra close combat, and the combination of that, even into resisted targets, from the first Surging Strikes into the close combat should usually knock it out. Okay, so that is all the Victory Road teams. Congrats to Sam once again for the win there. Really big win for Terapagos. I think it's won 2 weekends in a row now. I don't think it had any wins in the last format, so that's pretty big for it overall. But yeah, looking at this Victory Road, or this Trainer School tournament, so 400 prize pool, lots of entrants, but ultimately was won by a Dondozo Calyrex Shadow Rider team, which got top 16 at the World Championship. Not this specific one. There was one, the exact team created by Adjusted Nox. The exact spreads for that team are here. It also got top 8, but I'll go into that when the time comes. But yeah, this is the team running a really cool Hyper Beam Life Orb set on the Calyrex Shadow Rider. So really offensive there, just an option to just knock out anything that would otherwise be kind of annoying that could otherwise take Astral Barrage Psychic coverage. You just can go for a Terra Normal Hyper Beam at random and really threaten them. It's also just like very scary to be playing against that because it's very rare they're actually going to pop that option, but it's always there as an option to kind of force you into certain defensive plays. You also have Weezing that's kind of part of the identity of this team, is the Weezing with the Toxic Spikes and the Poison Gas in combination with the very bulky defensive order up Dondozo with a lot of defensive investment and the special defensive investment. After you get the Toxic Spikes up, the Poison Gas up on the opposing team, it's just really hard to combat the Dondozo. You can just chip things down really quickly with the Calyrex Shadow Rider as the Weezing sets up the Spikes or the Poison Gas, and then bring in Dondozo and just clean up the rest of the opposing Pokemon. After that, you have an Ogerpon to go for Follow Me as well as threaten offensive damage. Follow Me to get the Poison Gas and the Spikes up, and then Roaring Moon similarly can go for Tailwind plus the Weezing can go for the Spikes if you really, really value that. But I do think the Roaring Moon's option to just threaten opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider in a mirror, basically go for Tailwind and go for your own Astral Barrage against them, is super high value, especially when you can just safely go for a Terra Normal and never really have to worry about getting knocked out by Astral Barrage. I do like that a fair bit. And then you have Knockoff to be able to knock off opposing Shadow Riders and Calyrex Ice Riders, and then Acrobatics with the Terra Flying knocks out opposing Urshifu. So overall, a bit more offensive of a take that compared to what Justin had before, but something I definitely do like. So as mentioned before, the second place team was the same Terapagos team. I think the exact same one as Zelda, but this top 4 team is really reminiscent of both Montana Mott's Los Angeles winning team as well as Adi's top 4 team at the same tournament, kind of mixing and matching a lot of EV spreads. But yeah, we have the Calyrex Shadow Rider with the Covert Cloak Calm Mind set, so not going to ramp up as quickly as opposing Calyrex Rider, but definitely Calyrex Shadow Rider, but functions as a lot bulkier of a Pokemon that benefits more from the Rillaboom's leftovers, or the Rillaboom's, pseudo leftovers with the grassy terrain. The Friend Guard really benefits the boosted up Calyrex a whole lot. And then the Covert Cloak after you've gone for the Terastallization means you still can't get fake outed by opposing Rillaboom and Incineroar. So in theory, you should win the fake out cycly Calyrex Shadow Rider wars, but it can definitely be very precarious, so you do have to play your Clefairy quite effectively. Speaking of the Clefairy, it has Helping Hand to boost up the Calyrex Shadow Rider after one Calm Mind to get the same KOs, rather a little bit more damage than you would have if you were +2. If you're going from a +1 plus Helping Hand Calyrex Shadow Rider, you have Follow Me, of course, to redirect attention, and then after you is Anti-Trick Room. So if you run a min speed Clefairy, you'll underspeed most Amoonguss unless they're min speed. You'll underspeed min speed Calyrex Ice Rider. So all that's really important to basically, if they set up Trick Room against you, still be able to boost up and take knockouts with the Calyrex Shadow Rider unless they have their Amoonguss in play, in which case you can go for Terra Grass if you haven't used your Terra yet to ignore the spores. Outside of that, it is a pretty standard team. The Incineroar is a safety goggle set with a lot of special defense investment. A lot of these EV spreads are taken from Audie's team, so maybe a little outdated, but should be generally pretty strong. Once again, we have the Stellar Terra Urshifu to handle opposing Terapagos really well. Just chip it down with Grassy Glide or another move, maybe even go for knockoff early in the game to make sure they don't leftovers back up to full. And then you're able to go for a Stellar Terra close combat for a KO. Taunt's really effective against things like Amoonguss, opposing Follow Me Pokemon. So yeah, just a generally great utility move that might get a little bit more usage than Aqua Jet, given you have a Tornadus to set up Tailwind to let everything outspeed, as well as having an additional priority move on the Rillaboom. You might not be clicking Aqua Jet that often anyways. Tornadus is a Rocky Helmet set with enough EVs to survive a Choice Scarf Terra Water Surging Strike from opposing Urshifu, so be able to go for Tailwind and then follow up with a Bleak Windstorm. I'm running enough offensive investment to be able to knock out a 4 HP, 4 special defense Urshifu, I think like 87% of the time with a Bleak Windstorm, so that can be important. Also running enough speed to outspeed a Adamant Urshifu, but I'm not certain about this EV spread. Feel free to change it around. And then Terra Dark is strong against opposing Calyrex if you really want to make sure your Tornadus sticks around, or you could just go for Terra Dark in front of a Prankster Taunt and you really need Tailwind, so lots of options there. So yeah, overall an interesting top 4 Calm Mind Tailwind combination on the Calyrex Shadow Rider team. Pretty interesting overall. We have another interesting team in the top 4, a Zamazenta Bascia Legion team with Iron Jugulis. So we have Wide Guard on the Pelipper and Tailwind on the Jugulis. Wide Guard just to be able to block all the many spread moves on this format and open up an Iron Defense option on the Zamazenta. Here I've chosen to have my Zamazenta outspeed opposing Landorus Incarnate form, but really that's just trying to outspeed Chi-Yu, and then I'm already there, so I just outspeed it by 1 more to make sure we get the Landoruses if we ever play that. Generally, you're going to be going for Iron Defense with the Amoonguss redirecting attention, or going for Fake Out on the Rillaboom to get openings to do that, or even just going for Tailwind with the Iron Jugulis early game to make sure you get a Iron Defense off before your opponents are able to move. That's pretty cool. And then the rest of the team, you have the Pelipper and the Bascia Legion to really make your opponent think twice about bringing any Sun options like Koraidon. Koraidon can kind of be a problem for Zamazenta, but with the Iron Defense and the Rain, I really have to imagine it's going to be hard for them to beat you 1v1, as well as the Tailwind option. Yeah, overall a pretty cool team. We didn't see a lot of Bascia Legion doing well in Regulation G, so notable to see it popping up early here. I know there was a strong, I think, top 16 Zamazenta team at the World Championship with Rain, but I think it was Urshifu on that team, so cool to see people innovating on the Rain Zama archetype. Now going into the top 8 teams, we have a Koraidon Trick Room team. It's very interesting. We have a U-turn Koraidon, which functions really well with the Guts Flame Orb Ursaluna. You can go for Parting Shot into the Ursaluna, you can go for Volt Switch into the Ursaluna. Basically, you're trying to get Guts up as consistently as possible. If you're looking for the Trick Room Pokemon on the team, it's actually the Flutter Mane. We're running a really interesting Flutter where it can function as a max speed Icy Wind or a Moonblast option for the Koraidon mode. And if you want to go for the Trick Room mode as a mix-up, it's kind of hard to tell on lead. If you lead like Flutter Mane Koraidon, it's hard to tell whether you're going to go for a U-turn Trick Room or you're just going to go Icy Wind Flare Blitz and take a knockout, or Icy Wind Collision Course. So that's really cool. Beyond that, we have a great bulky supporting cast of the Incineroar, which can not really take advantage of the offensive traits of the Sun being up, but you're not weak to water-type moves anymore. That can be pretty cool. You do have to be careful. You are making yourself weaker to Chi-Yu on the Amoonguss, but you have Terra Water to cover for that. Covert Cloak, really strong against the fake-out cycling teams, can be strong against opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider teams that try and cycle and make sure you don't get a Spore off. The Amoonguss can get around that with the Covert Cloak. I can imagine this team being a little weak to Calyrex Ice Rider, so I optimize a lot of the EV spreads to handle that. The Amoonguss will take 1 Glacial Lance from a non-boosted Calyrex Ice Rider. The Incineroar takes a Glacial Lance into a high horsepower. Maybe not 100% of the time, but should take it most of the time. You have Taunt to be able to stop Trick Room from going up if you want that to be the case. And then Raging Bolt is really strong against the Rain teams. People think they can just go for a Urshifu Pelipper mode against you. You do, of course, have the extremely bulky and offensive Raging Bolt to take advantage of that. Not running a lot of speed here to function out of the Trick Room, of course, and then you could run a bit of speed to make sure that you outspeed Urshifu after a Icy Wind, but I think because you have the Thunderclap, it's not entirely necessary to do that, so just keeping it there. And then as mentioned, we have the Ursaluna with the Headlong Rush, Facade, and Earthquake, running min speed just so that at worst we're speed tying with opposing Calyrex Ice Rider and Trick Room, can potentially take a knockout before they're able to move. And here we have a Terra Poison on the Ursaluna to be able to resist both the Rillaboom and Urshifu, their main damage options into you in the Sun. And then, of course, yeah, you have the Sun to be able to resist the Water-type moves. Kind of resist, like pseudo-resist the Water-type moves with the Sun active against the Urshifu. A really unexpected team. I wasn't expecting Trick Room Koraidon to have an especially big performance in the Trainer School tournament. But yeah, now we have Justin Knox's team, which got top 8 at Worlds, definitely check out his report for this team on CK49's YouTube channel. Basically him and Justin Knox going over the team in detail, but very similar to the first place team. The focus is to get the Weezing Galar, Toxic Spikes, and Poison Gas active for the bulky Dondozo. Calyrex Shadow Rider to break things down early or clean up late game. Indeedee lets you do that even more effectively. Instead of having Psychic, you have Expanding Force on the Calyrex Shadow Rider as your Psychic type moves, which obviously does a lot more damage. A Redirector that is just really annoying to knock out in the Indeedee, and then an Urshifu with the Choice Scarf, which can actually go for a Rock Tomb with the Jolly set to really make opposing Calyrex Shadow Riders kind of sad against your own Calyrex Shadow Rider. You go for the Rock Tomb first against them, knock it out with your Astral Barrage the next turn, or the same turn if they did not go for Protect. And of course, they can't Protect in front of the Choice Scarf Unseen Fist Urshifu. You can also use this against opposing Urshifu Choice Scarf. Most of them run Adamant, but we are running Jolly here, meaning we can go for the Rock Tomb first, and then follow up with a KO with either Astral Barrage or Expanding Force, and really catch them off guard that way. So yep, just another proven team doing really well in the online tour. Very similar story for these next two teams, some of the top Calyrex Ice Rider teams. From the World Championship, we have the team that was able to get, I want to say, top 8, the Regieleki, a more offensive Calyrex Ice Rider team with the Electroweb Regieleki, comboing really well with a faster Calyrex Ice Rider, Landorus Incarnate, Ogerpon, and Urshifu Rapid Strike. So overall, pretty offensive team. And then you have the defensive backbone of the Farigiraf and the Calyrex Ice Rider, which can function in the Trick Room, and the rest of the team, which covers the weaker matchups of the Trick Room with the faster mode of the Regieleki, Ogerpon, Urshifu, and Landorus. I'll spare the details on the EV spreads just because Adi has another video, CK49, with Navjeet going over this team in detail with the EV spread, so check that out for sure. And then the last team in the top 8, we have this team that I want to say maybe Roxanne was one of the top finishers, but I believe the team was popularized by Fede Campo before the World Championship. This Ogerpon Rillaboom double grass type core with the Calyrex Ice Rider with the Farigiraf. So a lot of similar components to the team that Navjeet was able to get top 8 with, but instead of the Urshifu and the Landorus and the Regieleki, we have a I guess it still is the same Urshifu, but we have a Rillaboom over the Landorus and a Regibolt over the Regieleki. So maybe a bit more consistent options, but does definitely open you up to certain matchups. Like I think opposing Zamazenta is pretty tricky for this team, as well as Dondozo, which Navjeet might have a little bit of an easier time with his team. Basically, you have the main Trick Room mode, which I think is maybe a little stronger on this team. You have the Fake Out and Follow Me pressure to get that up consistently, and then the Ogerpon Urshifu mode to operate if the Trick Room isn't up, but you're really relying on a lot of priority moves, which is a little weaker than the active speed control of the Regieleki. So definitely has its strengths. This team is a lot bulkier, but the other team is a lot faster. It's very interesting to me that Calyrex Ice Rider seems to have had a very weak showing in all the Victory Road tours, and honestly, the Trainer Cup tours hasn't done that well. 2 in the top 8 is definitely strong, but Calyrex Ice Rider was a Pokemon people were saying was top 2 or top 3. Coming to the World Championships, it got a strong second place finish there, but outside of that, hasn't been doing well online, so definitely something to be watching coming into the first European Regional in a couple weeks. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy these videos, just me going in detail over these tournaments and these teams. If these videos help you out at all, subscribe to see some more, give a like to the video, and let me know which teams you want to see more of in the future. Of course, as mentioned before, the teams are in the description with all the EV spreads, so check that out if you want to take them to Pokemon Showdown yourself or recreate them for a tournament. And yeah, with all that being said, peace y'all.